We are going to talk a little bit about practical things that we can do if we are struggling with any kind of chronic illness or disability, and we want to engage either with ourselves or with our partners in a sexual way. So my first question is just, what are some good ways to feel sexy and desirable, even if you're struggling with something that society doesn't see as such all the time? I know for me, right after my diagnosis and being in a lot of pain, I remember being in the bathtub. I had lavender essential oils, I had candles. I was in so much pain, but I took this really sexy photo of myself, and it was an interesting moment of like, being in pain and being sexy aren't antonyms. They're not. They can exist in the same space. Mm-hmm. And that was an interesting moment for me.
Mm-hmm. I think that one of the most important things, I think, in terms of feeling sexy and staying connected with your sexuality when you're dealing with a chronic illness or a disability, is a process of self-acceptance and exploring what your relationship is with your illness or your disability, particularly if this is later onset in life, like it was for me. There's an acceptance process. There's a process of letting it be part of you, of not trying to segment off this part of yourself, but just letting it be there, and not feeling like, oh, this is actively damaging me all the time, or this is tainting me or something. So there's very much a healing process just in terms of how you think about yourself, how you find your own internalized ableism. I think that's a really, really important part of being able to feel sexy is exploring that part of it. Beyond that, I think that looking at the exploration of your sexuality maybe from a blank slate rather than either comparing to what you used to be able to do or comparing to what everyone else does. Really looking at it from a blank slate, looking at it from a healing perspective of, I need to transition this thing that I think of as bad or painful or sickly, and I need to move it towards something positive and valuable and meaningful, or whatever sex is to you. Mm-hmm. And have patience for that, have a lot of self-compassion in terms of the time that takes in making that transition, and being willing to kind of start over and find what works for you and what doesn't work for you, what you like and what you don't like, and just kind of throwing all preconceptions about what sex is and how you do sex and what sexy looks like for you out the window and just starting over.
And how do you best communicate this with a partner? Because that's something I think that Rory was kind of talking about on the phones earlier. That's something that I know I've had to navigate, and I have many friends who also have had to have conversations like this, either around a new partner who you're just starting to get to know, or if it is something that is onset later in life, something that maybe a long-term partner has to now also kind of start with that blank slate. How do you communicate that to a partner, and how do you keep that from turning into maybe a conversation that stymies the sexual and romantic part of your relationship instead of helping it grow?
I think in addition to you having acceptance and finding what your relationship is with your disability, your partner also has to do that. Your partner also has to go through a process of figuring out what this is and what it means for them. So there's also patience with that. I think that with the communication, one of the important things that I've heard is make sure that your partner understands that you are the authority on what your body can and cannot do. Mm-hmm. And that goes both ways. That is both, if I say I cannot do that, that's not negotiable. I can't do that.
Right.
But it also means if I say I can do this, I can. Even if it looks like I'm in pain, even if it looks like I'm having a bad day and I don't have the resources, you don't get to choose for me whether or not I can do this. I'm the one that is in the best position to make that assessment. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of issues with partners worrying that their disabled partner is fragile and that they're scared of breaking them. And exercise caution. but also listen to what your partner is telling you about what, what is and isn't okay. The other big thing that I've heard is particularly important with that is that people who are new to having sex with someone that's disabled, particularly if there's something like with chronic pain happening, they always want a definitive list of tell me what it is that you can do and I will only do those things, or tell me what it is that you cannot do and I will avoid those things. Bodies don't work that way. They just don't. Bodies are very gray. They change constantly. I often say that my disability, I have a different disability every day. I wake up to find out what my disability is, where is my pain today, what movements are possible for me and which ones are not. And so even if I were able to give you a defined list of what I cannot do today, that's going to be different tomorrow. So what's the point of having that list? So really seeing it as an interactive process, as an ongoing learning process that, like, just like with any other type of consent, that's something that's always developing. That's something that you're always seeking that connection. You're always making sure that this is still okay, and that whatever you're doing is working and is a good thing to do. That you have to continue doing that with disability as well. That it doesn't just stop because you've had that one conversation. That it continues to be a conversation over time.
Bodies change, tastes adapt, and that's something that honestly is applicable across the board too. You don't get to say I had one conversation and so now everything is laid out and I can do this and we can't do that. That's something that's going to be negotiable across the board.
And I think that's incredibly true. And I usually like to point folks to Sexual Intelligence, the book by Marty Klein, where he talks a lot about how bodies do change and we need to, I guess, roll with that and accept that rather than trying to struggle and fight with that. I guess my question to you is, are there any other particular books or resources, certainly your blog, but anything else that you might encourage people who are struggling with these questions to look towards?
Yeah, one resource that I found out about, let's see, what is it called? It's called enhancetheuk.org/sexy. And that this is a resource for talking about sex and disability and giving a lot of information about that. But that's a good resource. A resource that I think that everyone should have regarding sexuality, regardless of your level of ability, is the book "Come As You Are" by Emily Nagoski. That book is just so incredibly good at your own self-exploration and knowing what you need and what works for you and how to promote that kind of communication with your partner. That I think everyone on the planet should read that book. So definitely applicable here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'll just remind everybody that we'll definitely make sure to have a list of these sorts of things as well as some other resources in a link in the comments on the YouTube page.
That's great. I love getting book recommendations about this kind of thing because honestly, I'm still making up for lost time.
Sure.
After growing up the way I did, I was like, give me all of the books about everything. And then I think my very last question for you tonight, apart from anything you would like to bring up as we close out, is kind of the role of self-care in all of this, and how does that come into play, and how do you make sure you're taking care of yourself first? For me, I know that was a lot of making myself feel okay about saying no to sex and to not always being available 24/7 for it, even though I felt like as somebody with a vagina, that was my job, I was like, oh, I need to just be here all the time, ready to go. And that's not the case. And I had to make peace with that myself.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think maybe looking at it in terms of the goal here is for both parties to have enjoyable sex. So if you are going into this at a time when you're not up for sex, when you're going to be in a ton of pain and you don't want to tolerate that, or doing a position that is not comfortable for you right now, you're not going to have an enjoyable time, so you're not meeting your goal. And as long as you're framing it as that rather than I have to have sex a certain amount or I have to please my partner, I think that makes self-care a lot easier. Something that is kind of a double-edged sword with disability and sex is that sex, it raises your pain threshold. So you are less aware of the pain that you are in while you are having sex. This is great if sex tends to aggravate your pain, but in non-damaging ways.
Right.
That, that basically you won't be as aware of it, and so you won't be bothered by it, which is great because pain, if you're not into that, pain can be a big libido killer. But then the other side of it is that once the sex is over, your body's wrecked. And so like for my experience, basically what I have found is that I need to set aside that time, that that sex is important enough to me that it is worth it to me to do that sometimes, but I can't do that all the time. And I can't do that before I have a big long day that's planned where I'm going to be on my feet all day. If I do that, it's just not going to work. So I have to plan ahead of time. Scheduled sex is a lot more common when you have a disability. Spontaneous sex is harder to do. And be okay with that. Be okay with finding the way that it works for you, because otherwise there's not a point. There's really not a point to making yourself have sex that you don't want to have.
Right.
Sure.
And another thing that is probably very specific to individual circumstances, but be okay getting up and leaving their house and to go home if you need to. I remember when I was dealing with this, I had been dating somebody for about a year, maybe a little bit less. And at one point, I woke up in the middle of the night. I was like, I was in so much pain. I just wanted to go home. And I did. And that was taking care of me first. And it actually ended up, my partner was like, thank you for being comfortable enough in our relationship that you felt like you could go home and you didn't have to stay and suffer at my place. So yeah, if you have that kind of communication with somebody, that's gonna fix a lot of those potential problems.
Yeah, speaking up when something is going wrong is, is always important in sex, but particularly when the safety of your body is in play. I have definitely had several times where I have not spoken up. It was totally on me. It was not something I was pressured into doing. It was just I was caught up in the moment or whatever, and really regretted it later that I really, really paid for that, and was not very functional for a while afterwards. And it was like, whoops, okay, well, I should not do that again. And you learn, you make mistakes, and then you learn from them, and that's something that you have to be prepared to do, is to have that learning curve. But it really is better to speak up and say, like, no, this isn't working for me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Kella, for joining us tonight and for sharing all of the things that you've experienced yourself and that you've studied and you've researched. I think this was a very important conversation, and I'm very happy that I was able to be a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I have been just kind of in awe, I think, of the challenges and then really the workarounds. The ingenuity, the cleverness and creativity, and just action of functioning in a world that's not really shaped or built around you. So I really applaud the work that you're doing on YOP, the way that you're just communicating to people and helping them find a way to navigate the space around them.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you can find all of Kella's work on YOP. That's at yopvoice.com. That's your website. And then you're also on Twitter at Kella Hanna-Wayne. And you should follow her on Twitter because she has some bomb-ass tweets.
I'm also at Kella Hanna-Wayne on Facebook and Medium and Instagram.
Okay,